You've probably heard the Christmas story in Luke 2 100 times. A decree goes out from Kaiser Augustus. Everyone went to his own town to be registered. Joseph travels from Nazareth to Bethlehem because he's from the line of David. And then you hear the common objection. That's not how Roman censuses worked. Romans would never make you go back to some ancestral village. Luke has just made it up to get Jesus to Bethlehem. Well, in this video, I want to slow down and ask a very specific historical question. That is, as an historian, is Luke's description of a census that forces Joseph to go to Bethlehem historically plausible? We're going to look at what Luke actually claims, what we know about Roman censuses from real papyri in Egypt, how Jewish ideas of home and ancestral town fit into that, and then the big question, if Joseph lives in Nazareth, why on earth is he going to Bethlehem? So I'm not going to just hand wave problems away. I want to show you what the evidence does and does not allow us to say. I'm Dr. David Pendergrass. If you enjoy these kinds of deep dives into the ancient context of the New Testament, I'll tell you about some resources I've written at the end of this video. But let's get to the text. First, let's hear Luke in his own words. Luke 2 1-3 says, "In those days a decree went out from Kaiser Augustus to register all the empire for taxes. This was the first registration taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Everyone went to his own town to be registered." Then verse 4, "So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family line of David." Two key phrases. Everyone went to his own town to be registered. Joseph goes to Bethlehem because he is of the house and family of David. Right away, people raise an objection. Romans registered you where you actually lived. They didn't care where some ancestor lived centuries ago. If Joseph lives in Nazareth, Nazareth is his town. Having him go to Bethlehem would wreck the census. So is Luke describing something historically impossible? Or is there a way to understand this inside the world of the first century? Well, to answer that, we have to pull in evidence from somewhere we have a lot more documentation. That is, a Roman Egypt. Under Augustus, the Romans systematized censuses throughout the empire. They weren't doing this for fun. I doubt it. They wanted numbers for taxation, conscription to the army, and administrative control. In Greek-speaking provinces, the key term for this process is apography. A word means registration or enrollment. That's the exact term Luke uses in Luke 2:2. This was the first registration taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So already Luke is using standard technical language. He's not making up a fancy term. In Egypt, the dry climate preserved thousands of papyrus documents, including census edicts and census returns. These are not theological texts. They're boring government paperwork, which is exactly what we want if we're asking, how did this actually work? So let me give you one of the most important examples. There's a papyrus known as BL Papyri 904, dated to the year 104 after Jesus. It's an edict from Gaius Vibius Maximus, the Roman prefect of Egypt. So here's the main thing of what he says. I'll just paraphrase it. The house-to-house census having begun, it is essential that all those who, for any reason whatsoever, are absent from their own nomes, their home districts, be summoned to return to their own hearths, so that they may perform the customary business of registration and attend to this cultivation that concerns them. That's a Roman governor describing a census, a house-to-house census, and demanding that people who are away from home return to where they actually belong. So notice a few things. The census is organized household by household. People who are temporarily away are required to come back. They must return to their own hearths and their own district. The purpose is clear: accurate registration and care of the land. This is important because it shows us that in at least one Roman province, a census was not sign up wherever you happen to be traveling. A census was you go back to your real home base when we take the roll. The same technical word appears here, apography, registration. Luke is using the same kind of language for the enrollment in his story. So, at the level of basic practice, people going back home for a census, Luke's description has a clear parallel in Roman Egypt. Well, there's another type of evidence too. A papyrus known as Oxyrhynchus 255, dated to 48 years after Jesus, is actually a census return. A woman named Thermotherion is listing the members of her household for the authorities. In her declaration, she refers to those who, quote, have returned and live in my household. So even in the wording of her oath, the idea is the census is about who is actually present in this household. And some of those people have returned from wherever they were staying. So taken together, these papyrus show Roman censuses could be household based. People were required to be in their home district and household when the census took place. And that same technical term, apographie, is used for the process. All of that makes Luke's general picture, people going to their own town for a registration, completely believable in a Roman context. But now we have to be, of course, honest and careful. These Egyptian documents do not say everyone must go to the city of their distant ancestors from 1,000 years ago. They say, in effect, go back to your actual home district. Go back to your real hearth and household. Don't be out of town when the census takers come. That's about current domicile, real home base, not legendary ancestry. So if we say, look, the Egyptians prove that Romans always made you go to a long lost ancestral town, that goes way past the evidence. And I've heard Christian apologists do that. The papyri show the idea of going home for a census is Roman. Registration is tied to the true home household, not just where you happen to be visiting. But they do not spell out a system built on 1,000 year ago genealogies. So, how does that help us with Luke? How does that help us with Joseph? This is where we have to remember something. At the time of Jesus' birth, Judea was not yet a normal Roman province administered directly by a Roman governor like Egypt. It was a client kingdom under Herod the Great. That means the big picture, there will be an enrollment, can be a part of Roman policy. The local implementation can be shaped by Jewish law and custom. And in Jewish law and tradition, where you belong is not just where you currently sleep at night. It's deeply tied to tribal allotments of land in the Old Testament, ancestral towns, fathers' houses, and extended family lines, long genealogical lists sorted by town and clan, like you see in Ezra and Nehemiah. When the Jews come back from exile, they are recorded as going back to their ancestral towns, even if they hadn't personally lived there before. The land and the people are organized by family and town. Now imagine a census being carried out in that world. Rome wants to know who lives where, who holds what land, who owes what taxes and obligations. Herod's administration is thinking in Jewish categories. House and family of X belong to town Y. These clans are attached to these ancestral towns. So when Luke says Joseph goes up to Bethlehem because he was of the house and family of David, it's not just a theological flourish. It's the kind of language you would use in a Jewish legal and genealogical context. The Roman goal is still the same. Register people with the correct jurisdiction and obligations. The Jewish mechanism could very well involve ancestral towns and clans. So at this point, we can say Roman censuses could certainly require you to be at your true home base. In Judea, that true home base could be understood through ancestral town and family line. That makes Joseph going to Bethlehem at least historically plausible within that cultural fusion. Now, that still leaves us with a good question, I think. Okay, but Joseph lived in Nazareth. Why isn't Nazareth his hometown for census purposes? Wouldn't sending him to Bethlehem actually screw up the census? Let's talk about Nazareth and Bethlehem directly. Now, if we slow down and listen to Luke carefully, we actually get two different kinds of home language. On the one hand, Nazareth is clearly home for Joseph and Mary in everyday life. In Luke 1, the angel Gabriel is sent to a town of Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin named Mary. That's where she lives before any of his birth events. In Luke 2:39, after Jesus is born, after the presentation of the temple, Luke says, "So when Joseph and Mary had performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth." So Nazareth is explicitly called their own town. So in Luke's story, before the census, they're in Nazareth. After everything is done, they go back to Nazareth, their own town. Nazareth is where they actually live. On the other hand, in Luke 2, 3 to 4, when he describes the census, he uses slightly different language. Quote, everyone went to his own town to be registered. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee, Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family line of David. End quote. Here, Joseph's own town for registration purposes is Bethlehem, because of his house and family line, his Davidic ancestry. So we have everyday residents, Nazareth, their own town, legal ancestral registration town, Bethlehem, Joseph's own city in relation to David's line. That's not a contradiction. It's two different layers of identity. We actually have an analogy in our own world. Think of a college student. They spend most of the year in another state. Let's say they're out of state. They might say, I live in Boston. But when they fill out their official forms, they put permanent address, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Or think of it, someone in the military. They're stationed overseas, but their legal home of record is still their parents' house in another state. The same human phenomenon. Where you live functionally, where you are officially attached for legal and administrative purposes, are two different things. It can be two different things. In Joseph's case, functionally, his and Mary's life is in Nazareth. Legally, in the census, his ancestral home base is Bethlehem as a descendant of David. In a Jewish client kingdom, that distinction can make good sense. Now, you might say, look, what if Joseph hasn't been back to Bethlehem his whole life? Maybe his grandparents lived there or his great-grandparents, but he doesn't actually live there himself. Well, if the Romans send him there, that ruins the census, doesn't it? Well, if Joseph has no living family in Bethlehem, no land, no legal or clan connection there at all, and the authorities still force him to travel to Bethlehem purely because David lived there 1,000 years ago, yeah, that would be bizarre and inefficient. uh, but we don't know that about Joseph. We don't. The Gospels don't give us his full biography. What we do know is this: Luke is writing in Jewish categories. He uses language of house and family of David. He assumes Bethlehem is Joseph's correct city for this particular registration. So a more realistic scenario, if we fill in the historical background, would be something like this. Joseph's extended family originates from Bethlehem. They may still have some kind of legal, genealogical, or property tie to that town. Joseph's branch of the family ends up in Nazareth, maybe for work, maybe for marriage, maybe as part of broader settlement patterns in Galilee. But his family registration is still tied to Bethlehem as the Davidic clan's home base. If that's how things stand on the ground, then sending Joseph to Bethlehem for the census doesn't wreck the census at all. It actually helps. It connects him to the right cluster of family members. It ties him to the correct ancestral town for land and tax obligations. It lines up with how a Jewish administration might categorize people. Again, do we have a papyrus that spells this out for Joseph? No, we don't. We don't have a line that says, all descendants of David must report to Bethlehem. So we have to be modest. We cannot claim this is exactly provably how it worked in Judea. What we can say is, Roman censuses were not always register wherever you happen to be. At least in some places, they required you to be at your real home base. Jewish concepts of home base were strongly shaped by ancestral town and clan. Luke's description of Joseph going to Bethlehem because he was the house and family of David fits that mixed Roman-Jewish context. So it is historically plausible that Nazareth is Joseph's daily home, Bethlehem is his family's official home base, and a census implemented with Jewish categories could rightly send him to Bethlehem, even though he normally lives in Nazareth. Now, if you bring in Matthew into the picture, it gets even more complicated. Matthew tells the story differently. In Matthew 2, Jesus is born in Bethlehem, and the Magi visit him in a house there. After the flight to Egypt, when Joseph wants to come back, he's afraid to go to Judea because of Archelaus. So he withdraws to Galilee and settles in a town called Nazareth, so that Jesus would be called a Nazarene. So in Luke, Nazareth is home from the beginning. Bethlehem is a temporary census destination and birthplace. In Matthew, Bethlehem appears to be home from the start. Nazareth is where they later settle. Scholars have spent a lot of time trying to harmonize the details, those that try to harmonize it. You can propose scenarios that combine them, but the Gospels themselves are not trying to give you a modern diary-style biography of Joseph's movements. Here's what they both agree on, though. Jesus is truly born in Bethlehem. Jesus is truly raised in Nazareth and known as Jesus of Nazareth. Even Jesus' opponents in the New Testament know him as a Galilean from Nazareth. People in John 7 reject him because they think the Messiah must come from Bethlehem, and they don't realize he actually did. So the early Christian memory holds Bethlehem as the messianic birthplace, Nazareth as his ordinary hometown. So from a historian's perspective, Luke fills in the link with the census. The question is that link crazy or plausible? Given what we've seen, the use of the term apography is historically appropriate. The idea of going back to one's real home base for a census is Roman. The use of ancestral town and family is deeply Jewish. Judea at the time is a Jewish client kingdom, not a carbon copy of Egypt. You put that all together, and Luke's scenario of a Nazareth resident going to Bethlehem for registration is not absurd at all. It's one historically intelligible way that a Roman-style census could have been carried out in that specific Jewish context. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to explore Christianity in more in depth like I do in this video, you're going to like these resources that I composed. If you're someone who wrestles with doubt, or you love someone who does, I wrote a book just for you. It's called A Skeptic Challenges a Christian. The whole book is framed as a candid dialogue between a thoughtful skeptic and a Christian. We tackle questions like, does science explain everything? Is belief in God just wishful thinking? Why I believe Jesus was divine and actually rose from the dead? I draw from science, philosophy, history, and personal experience to show why I find Christianity both rational and emotionally satisfying. Now, every single chapter ends with reflection questions you can use for small groups or for your own reflection. If this sounds helpful, you can find A Skeptic Challenges a Christian on my website under books. The link is in the description. If today's video stirred up a hunger to know Jesus more clearly, I'd love to point you to my book, Rediscover Jesus. A lot of Christians would struggle to list even 10 things Jesus actually taught. In this book, I act like a tour guide through the Gospels, using solid historical and biblical scholarship to help you hear Jesus the way his first century Jewish audience would have heard him. And then I'll show you how those teachings apply today. We walk through who God is, why trust the Gospels, what did Jesus believe about himself, what were the major teachings of Jesus, and what did they mean? This is great for new believers or longtime Christians. To grab a copy of Rediscover Jesus, just head to my website, click on books, and the link is in the description. Now, if you're ready to move from just believing in Jesus to actually being formed by him, that's exactly why I created Mathetes Discipleship Formation. It's an 8-week workbook designed as a practical training manual for new and growing disciples. It's based in historical context, biblical scholarship, with reflection questions and real-world examples today. We move from know what Jesus taught to do, practice it in real life, and to be formed into the kind of person Jesus wants you to be. We cover the 6 essential habits every disciple of Jesus must know and must practice. If you want a concrete path to grow as a disciple of Jesus, check out Mathetes Discipleship Formation on my website under books. The link is in the description. Now, before you click away, I want you to know you don't have to walk through your struggles alone. I offer pastoral counseling and coaching for individuals and couples, drawing on over 20 years of experience in biblical studies and counseling-related work. I regularly walk with people through grief and loss, trauma, anxiety, marriage issues, sin struggles and addictions, faith questions, just general emotional and spiritual burnout. My goal is to provide a safe, compassionate space where you can tell the truth, process what's really going on, and receive practical biblical guidance. They're not clinical therapy, but they're Christ-centered, confidential conversations that aim at clarity, healing, and growth. If you want someone to help walk through whatever you're going through, check out Pastoral Counseling link in my description, and there you're going to learn about the details and the pricing and how to book a session with me. If you'd like to partner with me in discipleship and help me keep creating resources like these, please consider giving by clicking the donate link in the description below. Your support really does help, and it really does help more people grow as disciples of Jesus. If this was helpful as well, this video, please subscribe to this channel. Click the notification bell and then let someone else know about this video and my ministry. God bless you, and I hope to see you next time.